In the far south of Israel, rain can disappear for months at a time. 60% of the country is desert or semi-arid land, and for decades, the future of the entire nation depended on a single freshwater lake. By every rule of geography, this should be a story about scarcity, about failed harvests, empty reservoirs, and a country slowly running dry. Instead, something remarkable happened. Today, Israel recycles more wastewater than any other developed nation on Earth. It manufactures drinking water directly from the sea. And in one of the strangest reversals in engineering history, it has started pumping water back into the very lake it once feared losing. How does a desert nation defeat its own geography? Not with one breakthrough, with three decisions spread across 6 decades that quietly rewrote the relationship between a country and its most precious resource. The first begins on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. In the years after 1948, the lake lies among the green hills of northern Israel, where winter rains are generous. Hundreds of kilometers south stretches the Negev desert, rock, sand, and relentless heat. Between these two landscapes stood the young nation's greatest problem. The people were moving south. The water wasn't. Immigrants were arriving from around the world, and the population was growing fast. New towns, expanding farms, growing industry, and every long-term plan collided with the same uncomfortable question: how do you build a modern country when nature placed your water in the wrong place? Drilling more wells couldn't fix it. Rainfall was unpredictable, groundwater was limited, and leaning almost entirely on the Sea of Galilee left the whole country one drought away from crisis. So engineers proposed something that sounded almost unreasonable. Instead of bringing people to the water, they would bring the water to the people. The result was the National Water Carrier, completed in 1964, stretching roughly 130 kilometers, linking pumping stations, canals, tunnels, reservoirs, and buried pipelines into one connected system. On a map, it looks simple, a line from a lake to a desert. In reality, one opponent stood in the way that no amount of determination could negotiate with: gravity. The Sea of Galilee lies more than 200 meters below sea level. Water wants to flow downhill, and here, downhill leads nowhere useful. Before gravity could carry a single drop south, engineers first had to lift it nearly 257 meters into the sky. Their solution vanished beneath the landscape. Near the shoreline, enormous pump halls were carved directly into the mountainside. Inside, massive electric pumps forced hundreds of millions of liters uphill every single day, releasing the water into canals and pressure pipelines where gravity could finally take over. Drivers passing above never suspected that one of the country's most important machines was working beneath their feet. Above ground, thousands of workers laid steel pipelines section by section across rocky hills and unstable ground, guided by survey teams measuring every route with extreme precision. Even a small error could disturb the flow of the entire system. When water finally began moving, the effect reached far beyond engineering. Communities that once relied on isolated wells joined a national network. Farming spread into regions long written off as too dry. The Negev gradually became a productive agricultural region, supplying a significant share of Israel's fruit and vegetables. For the first time, geography no longer decided where development could happen. The project worked, perhaps too well, because Israel kept growing. Cities expanded, living standards rose, and industry demanded more water every year. The carrier could move fresh water brilliantly, but it could never create more of it. And then the droughts arrived. Through the late 20th century, and especially in the early 2000s, dry year after dry year pushed the Sea of Galilee toward dangerously low levels. With every meter the lake dropped, the fear grew that continued pumping might permanently damage one of the country's most vital freshwater reserves. Israel's greatest engineering success had exposed its greatest remaining weakness. The country had mastered moving water. It had not escaped its dependence on rain. That realization changed the question entirely. Instead of asking where to find more fresh water, engineers began asking whether fresh water had to come from nature at all. Just beyond the western coastline lay the Mediterranean Sea, an effectively unlimited supply of water. The obvious problem, not a drop of it was drinkable. For decades, desalination had been a niche technology, Proven, but brutally expensive and hungry for energy. Most governments treated it as a last resort. Israel reached a different conclusion. The cost of desalination was becoming lower than the cost of running out of water. From 2005, the coastline began to change. The first major plant opened at Ashkelon. Hadera followed 4 years later. Then, in 2013, came Sorek, at the time the largest seawater reverse osmosis facility on Earth. Israel was no longer adapting to its climate. It was redesigning its water supply from the ground up. The principle is surprisingly simple. Seawater is driven under immense pressure through microscopic membranes. Water molecules pass through, salt stays behind. Essential minerals are restored, and the fresh water flows into the same national network that once depended almost entirely on a single lake. The engineering is impressive, the consequences matter more. Within little more than a decade, desalination grew to supply roughly 70 to 80% of Israel's drinking water in a typical year. Pumping from the Sea of Galilee fell dramatically, giving the lake a chance to recover. And for the first time in modern Israeli history, a long drought no longer automatically threatened the water coming out of the tap. Most countries would have stopped there. Israel didn't, because producing fresh water solved only half the problem. Agriculture remained one of the country's biggest water users, and demand would eventually catch up, unless every drop worked harder. So instead of asking how to make more water, Israel asked how many times the same water could be used. Near Tel Aviv, the Shafdan wastewater treatment system became the heart of that strategy. Water leaving homes, offices, and factories is extensively treated, then carried south through dedicated pipelines to irrigate farmland across the Negev. Today, roughly 87% of Israel's treated wastewater is reused, by far the highest rate among OECD countries. That number quietly rewired the economics of water. Cities received high-quality desalinated supply, while recycled water sustained much of the country's agriculture. Water stopped flowing in a straight line from source to drain. It began circulating through the economy, one drop performing several jobs before finally leaving the system. And then engineers proposed something that would have sounded absurd to the people who built the national water carrier. What if the flow could be reversed? The desalination plants were producing so much water that surplus supply could be pumped inland, not away from the Sea of Galilee, but back into it, turning the country's primary water source into a strategic reserve. New pipelines connected the coastal plants to the old network. Pumping stations built for one direction learned to run in the other. Control systems were upgraded to track pressure, quality, and flow across an increasingly complex grid. In 2023, the system switched on. For the first time, water manufactured from the Mediterranean began flowing back toward the Sea of Galilee. Consider what that means. 60 years earlier, Israel's defining challenge was moving fresh water from a lake to a desert. Now it can create fresh water from the sea and refill the very lake it once feared losing. The effects reach far beyond pipes and pumps. Cities grow with confidence. Farmers plan years ahead instead of one rainy season at a time. Industry invests knowing shortages are unlikely to halt production. And water security gives Israel flexibility in regional agreements, including water supplied to neighboring Jordan. But the most important lesson may lie far outside Israel's borders. Climate change is squeezing water systems on every continent. Longer droughts, hotter summers, growing populations. Yet no country can simply copy this blueprint. Desalination demands enormous energy, heavy investment, and access to the sea. What works on the Mediterranean coast may fail in Central Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. The real lesson is different. Water security can be engineered. Israel never changed its climate. It never made the desert wetter, never found a hidden river beneath the sand. It simply refused to accept that nature alone would decide its future. The national water carrier defeated geography. Desalination broke the dependence on rain. Recycling turned waste into a resource. Because the greatest infrastructure projects aren't measured in concrete poured or steel assembled. They're measured by the limits they convince humanity no longer have to exist.